The war room stretched across half a kilometer of polished black stone. Holographic displays floated in the air like frozen lightning, each one showing a different conquered world. Fleet Commander Jalrek stood before the largest display, his forearms clasped behind his armored back. He had commanded fleets for 300 cycles. He had witnessed the fall of 60 civilizations. Today would mark the 61st. "Show me the target," Jalrek said. The display shifted. A small yellow star appeared, surrounded by 8 planets. The third planet glowed blue and green. Data scrolled across the screen in the angular script of the Vorthian Empire. "Sol System," announced Subcommander Thera, her voice carrying the flat tone of someone who had given this briefing hundreds of times before. "Primary target is the third planet. Local designation, Earth. Population, approximately 8 billion. Technology level, primitive. They have achieved basic spaceflight but remain confined to their home system." Jalrek studied the planet. It looked peaceful from this distance. They always did. "What is their military capability?" "Minimal. They possess nuclear weapons, but these are short-range and slow. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light capability. Their largest spacecraft cannot travel beyond their own moon with crew." Thera paused. "The analysis team has classified them as Category 5. Minimal resistance expected." Around the war room, other Vorthian officers nodded. Category 5 was the lowest threat rating. It meant the invasion would be quick, clean. By the time the sun set on their capital cities, the humans would have surrendered. They always did. "What about their social structure?" Jalrek asked. This was the question that mattered. A unified species could sometimes mount an organized defense. A divided species crumbled before the first shot was fired. Fragmented, they have divided themselves into approximately 200 separate nations. These nations have conflicting interests and long histories of warfare with each other. Current intelligence suggests they cannot agree on basic resource distribution, much less a unified military response. Perfect. Jalrek had seen this pattern before. The Krell had been divided into 15 tribes. The Nexari had maintained 47 independent city-states. Neither civilization had survived more than 3 days once the compliance directive was broadcast. Fleet status? 400 warships ready for deployment. Estimated arrival time at target? 6 standard days. Recommended protocol. Broadcast compliance directive. Wait 72 hours for surrender. Proceed with subjugation. Jalrek touched the display, and Earth rotated slowly. Cities glittered on the night side like scattered gems. He wondered briefly how many of those lights would still be burning in a week. Then he dismissed the thought. Sentiment was inefficient. Initiate standard approach. Prepare the compliance directive. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Within moments, a message began its journey toward Earth at faster than light speed. It would arrive hours before the fleet, giving the humans time to understand their situation. Time to make the sensible choice. The message was simple. Every species heard the same words. You are inferior. You are obsolete. You will comply or you will be eliminated. You have 72 hours to surrender your governments, your weapons, and your independence. Resistance is extinction. Jalrek had sent this message 47 times. 40 times the target species had surrendered. 7 times they had fought. Those 7 civilizations no longer existed. Across the vast distance of space, the message raced toward the small blue world. Behind it, 400 Vorthian warships entered the slipstream, their hulls gleaming like knives. On Earth, the message arrived on a Tuesday. Dr. Sarah Chen was drinking her 3rd coffee of the day when the alarms began. She worked at the Arecibo Observatory's replacement facility in Puerto Rico, monitoring the sky for signals from beyond Earth. For 3 years, she had listened to nothing but cosmic static and the occasional burst from a distant pulsar. The job was quiet, peaceful, boring. The alarm was not quiet. Every screen in the facility flashed red. Data poured across her monitors so fast that the text blurred. Sarah's coffee cup hit the floor and shattered. She barely noticed. "Please tell me this is a drill," someone said behind her. It was not a drill. The signal was massive. It overwhelmed every receiver pointed toward deep space. It came from beyond the Oort cloud, from the darkness between stars. And it was clearly, unmistakably artificial. Sarah's hands shook as she isolated the signal. It took 40 minutes to decode. It took 4 seconds to understand. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, we need to call someone." We need to call everyone. Within an hour, every major government on Earth had received the same message. Within 2 hours, emergency meetings had been called in Washington, Beijing, Moscow, Brussels, and a dozen other capitals. Within 4 hours, the President of the United States addressed the world. My fellow citizens of Earth, she began, and her voice trembled despite her best efforts. We are not alone in the universe, and we have been contacted by others. The message is not friendly. The President read the compliance directive. Every word fell like a hammer. Surrender. 72 hours. Comply or be eliminated. Around the world, people stopped. They stopped working, stopped eating, stopped whatever they were doing, and stared at screens. Some cried. Some prayed. Some laughed because the alternative was screaming. The UN Security Council met in emergency session. Diplomats argued. Military advisors presented options. None of them were good. We could surrender, suggested the French ambassador. Perhaps they will be merciful. We could fight, countered the Russian general. Launch everything we have. With what? The American Secretary of Defense asked quietly. Our missiles travel at a fraction of light speed. Our ships can barely reach Mars. We're fighting with sticks against an enemy with nuclear weapons. In the back of the room, a young analyst named Marcus Rivera sat silently. He had been pulled from his position at the Pentagon because he was one of the military's best strategic thinkers. Now he listened as the most powerful people on Earth admitted they were helpless. We have 68 hours left, someone said. We need to make a decision. But what decision could they make? Surrender meant slavery for every human being. Fighting meant extinction. Either way, humanity lost. Rivera closed his eyes. Somewhere far above Earth, an alien fleet was approaching. 400 warships carrying technology. Humanity could barely imagine. They were coming to take everything humans had ever built, ever loved, ever fought for, and Earth had nothing to stop them. The meeting dragged on. Arguments became shouting matches. Shouting matches became quiet despair. As the sun set outside the UN building, humanity faced the truth. They were not ready for this. They had spent thousands of years fighting each other, and now someone bigger had arrived to end the fight permanently. Jalrex's fleet crossed the heliopause and entered the Sol system. Sensors confirmed what they already knew. No defensive fleet waited to meet them. No weapons platforms guarded the outer planets. Earth sat exposed and vulnerable exactly as predicted. Begin approach vector, Jalrex ordered. Standard formation. Weapons ready but not armed. This should be simple. His crew acknowledged the orders. The 400 warships aligned themselves and began the slow burn toward the third planet. In 3 days they would arrive. In 4 days, Earth would belong to the Vorthian Empire. It would be conquest number 847. Just another primitive world brought into the fold. Just another Tuesday for the Vorthian military machine. Jalrex watched Earth grow larger on his displays and felt nothing. He had done this too many times to feel anything anymore. Victory was inevitable. It was mathematics. It was simple physics. The strong dominated the weak. The advanced conquered the primitive. It was the way the galaxy worked, and nothing would change that. 48 hours remained. The world had stopped pretending everything would be okay. Cities emptied as people fled to nowhere in particular. Stock markets crashed and then closed entirely. Some people rioted. Others gathered in churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues to pray. A few simply sat with their families and waited for the end. In a secure facility beneath Geneva, representatives from every major nation gathered for what might be humanity's final council. General Marcus Rivera had been promoted 3 times in 2 days. Not because anyone thought military rank mattered anymore, but because someone needed to coordinate Earth's response. Someone needed to at least try. Dr. Sarah Chen sat beside him. Her expertise in alien communications had made her suddenly valuable. She had spent the last 2 days dissecting every byte of the Vorthian message, looking for something, anything humanity could use. I found something, she said quietly. The room fell silent. Hope was a dangerous thing to feel right now, but every person in the room felt it anyway. The Vorthian message includes metadata, information about how their communication network operates. I don't think they meant to include it. I think it's just part of their standard transmission protocol. General Rivera leaned forward. What does it tell us? I was able to trace their previous transmissions. Not the content, just the fact that they were sent. The Vorthians have broadcast this same compliance directive 846 times before. Sarah's voice dropped. We're number 847. Someone cursed. Someone else laughed bitterly. 846 civilizations. All of them had received the same message. All of them had faced the same choice. What happened to them? The Chinese premier asked. The other civilizations. Did any of them survive? Sarah pulled up a display. It showed a map of the galaxy with red dots scattered across multiple spiral arms. Each dot represented a conquered world. I cross-referenced the transmission dates with historical data from our deep space observations. Some of these civilizations we actually detected years ago. We saw their radio signals, their electromagnetic emissions. We thought we might contact them someday. She highlighted several dots. They turned black. These civilizations went silent after receiving the Vorthian message. Complete radio silence within days. Either they surrendered and were subjugated, or they fought and were destroyed. So we're choosing between slavery and extinction, the Russian ambassador said flatly. Yes. The room erupted in arguments again. Surrender versus fight. Death versus chains. The same circular debate that had consumed the last 2 days. General Rivera listened and said nothing. He had been thinking about something that had bothered him since the moment he read the compliance directive. The Vorthians had sent this message 846 times. They had conquered 846 civilizations. They had perfected the process. Broadcast the message, wait for surrender, occupy the planet. Simple, efficient, brutal, which meant they expected humanity to follow the script. Surrender or fight, nothing else. No third option, Rivera stood. His movement cut through the arguing voices like a knife. What if we don't give them what they expect? He said. Everyone stared at him. The German chancellor spoke first. Explain. The Vorthians have done this 846 times. They know how civilizations respond. Primitives surrender because they're afraid. Warriors fight because they're brave. Either way, the Vorthians win. They've optimized their strategy around those two responses. So what do you suggest? Asked the Japanese representative. We can't surrender and we can't win a fight. Rivera walked to the center of the room. We send them a message. Not a surrender. Not a declaration of war. Something they've never received before. Something that changes their calculations. What kind of message? Sarah asked. The truth. Everything about humanity. Our complete history. Our wars. Our weapons. Our survival. Our psychology. Everything. We make them understand exactly what they're dealing with. The British Prime Minister frowned. Why would that help? Showing them our history just proves we're violent and primitive. Exactly, Rivera said. We've spent the last 48 hours looking at this like a military problem. But it's not. It's a cost-benefit analysis. The Vorthians are an empire. Empires conquer because the benefits outweigh the costs. What if we show them that conquering Earth would cost more than they think? Sarah was nodding slowly. Her fingers flew across her tablet. If they're as efficient as we think, they've probably categorized us as low risk. Minimal resistance expected. Easy conquest. But what if we show them what humanity is actually capable of when cornered? We don't have weapons that can threaten them, someone objected. No, Rivera agreed. But we have something else. We have records, data, proof of what humans do when faced with extinction. We've survived ice ages without technology. We've rebuilt from plagues that killed half our population. We've created weapons capable of destroying our own planet and somehow managed not to use them. We fight wars that last generations. We never give up even when we should. He looked around the room at the assembled leaders of humanity. We tell them the truth. That if they invade Earth, they won't face a simple conquest. They'll face 8 billion humans who don't know how to surrender. Every occupation will be resisted. Every city will be a battlefield. Every generation will teach the next to fight. It won't be quick. It won't be clean. It will cost them. The room was silent. Then the American president spoke. You want to threaten them with guerrilla warfare? We'd lose. Eventually, yes. But the question is how much it would cost them to win. Empires don't like expensive conquests. They like easy ones. Sarah was already working. I can compile the data. Human history. Warfare documentation, survival records, psychological profiles. Everything that shows what we're capable of. I can format it in a way their systems can receive and process. How long do you need? Rivera asked. 12 hours, maybe less. General Rivera looked at the assembled leaders. I'm not saying this will work. I'm saying it's the only play we have that doesn't end with immediate surrender or immediate extinction. We show them who we are, all of it, the good, the bad, and the terrifying. We make them wonder if conquering Earth is worth the price. The debate lasted another hour, but in the end they agreed. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. If they were going to die, they would die honest. Project Last Word began immediately. Sarah Chen led a team of historians, military analysts, and psychologists. They compiled everything: the world wars, the Holocaust, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, every genocide, every atrocity, every moment of human darkness, but also the survival stories, the resistance movements, the soldiers who fought beyond the point of rational hope. They included medical data showing human pain tolerance and adaptability. They included footage from Earth's most extreme environments, showing humans living in deserts, Arctic wastes, and high-altitude mountains. They included cultural archives, horror movies, apocalyptic fiction, every story humans had ever told about refusing to die. And at the end of the compilation, they included a simple message: we are humanity. We don't know how to surrender. Come if you dare. 24 hours remained when they finished. The data package was massive. Hundreds of terabytes of information, all organized to show a single truth: humanity was dangerous. Not because they were strong, but because they refused to accept defeat. General Rivera reviewed the final compilation. It was brutal, honest, terrifying in its completeness. It showed humans at their absolute worst and somehow made that seem like a threat rather than a weakness. This is either the smartest thing we've ever done, he said quietly, or the stupidest. Does it matter? Sarah asked. We're out of time. She was right. The Vorthian fleet would arrive in 23 hours. The time for debate was over. Send it, Rivera ordered. All frequencies. Maximum power. Make sure they can't miss it. Sarah's hand hovered over the transmit button. This was it. Humanity's final message to the galaxy. She thought about everything that message contained. The wars, the weapons, the stubborn refusal to quit even when quitting was the smart choice. She thought about what aliens would see when they looked at human history. She pressed the button. The transmission burst from Earth at the speed of light, riding every frequency humanity could generate. It raced toward the approaching Vorthian fleet carrying the complete truth about humanity. The good, the bad, and everything in between. Somewhere in the darkness, 400 alien warships received the message and began to process it. Computers analyzed the data. Officers reviewed the findings. And slowly, aboard the Vorthian flagship, Fleet Commander Jalrex began to understand what Earth actually was, and what that meant for his perfect, efficient invasion plan. Fleet Commander Jalrex was reviewing deployment patterns when the alert sounded. His primary sensor officer turned, all four eyes wide with confusion. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the target world. A response to the compliance directive? Jalrex asked. This happens sometimes. Desperate species begging for mercy. It changed nothing. Ignore it. Maintain approach vector. Sir, this is different. It's massive. They're broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. The data package is extensive. Jalrex felt a twinge of curiosity. In 300 cycles of service, he had never heard of a target species doing this. They either surrendered with a simple message or stayed silent until the end. But a massive data transmission? That was new. What kind of data? The sensor officer consulted his displays. Historical records, technical specifications, biological data, cultural archives. It appears to be a comprehensive overview of their civilization. Interesting. Perhaps the humans thought understanding them would inspire mercy. It would not. But Jalrex had time before the fleet needed his attention. The invasion was still 18 hours away. Route it to my personal terminal. I'll review it. He returned to his quarters and pulled up the transmission. The human data package began with a simple text message in their primary language, automatically translated by Vorthian computers. We are humanity. Before you conquer us, know what you are conquering. Jalrex settled into his command chair and began reading. He expected propaganda, images of cultural achievements, art, music, scientific discoveries, the usual things dying civilizations wanted to be remembered for. What he found instead made him pause. The humans had sent their complete military history, every war they had ever fought, every weapon they had ever designed, every tactical doctrine they had ever developed. It was organized chronologically, starting thousands of years in their past. Jalrex read about ancient human warfare: swords, spears, primitive projectile weapons, armies of thousands clashing in hand-to-hand combat. The casualty numbers were staggering. In a single battle called Cannae, 50,000 humans died in one afternoon. They fought with bronze and iron. They fought over territory, resources, religion, pride. The wars never stopped. Century after century, humans fought. They developed new weapons: gunpowder, cannons, rifles that could kill from a distance, artillery that could destroy entire fortifications. And still they fought. Then came the 20th century. Jalrex stopped reading and stared at his display. The numbers could not be correct. He ran a verification program. The numbers were correct. In something called World War I, humans killed 17 million of their own species. The war lasted 4 years. They fought in trenches, breathing poison gas, watching their fellow soldiers die in the mud. And when it ended, they called it the war to end all wars. 20 years later, they started World War II. This time, 70 million humans died. The war consumed every continent. Cities were bombed into rubble. Millions were systematically murdered in what humans called the Holocaust. And at the end, humans used atomic weapons. They split atoms and turned matter into energy and vaporized 2 cities in seconds. Jalrex felt something he rarely experienced: unease. The humans had developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet. They had nearly used them. The documentation included something called the Cold War, where 2 human nations pointed thousands of nuclear weapons at each other for decades. They came within minutes of launching. Multiple times, and somehow, through luck or wisdom or sheer stubbornness, they did not. But the weapons still existed. Thousands of them. Waiting. He continued reading. The humans included documentation of their conventional warfare tactics: guerrilla warfare, insurgency, resistance movements. They included detailed case studies of occupations that failed: Vietnam, Afghanistan, Chechnya. Small groups of humans fighting superior forces for years, decades, wearing down invaders through ambush, sabotage, and pure refusal to surrender. The data package included psychological profiles. Human pain tolerance was remarkable for a species their size. They could survive injuries that would kill most species. They recovered from wounds that should be fatal. Their medical technology was primitive, but their biology was resilient, and they never gave up. The documentation was filled with examples. Cities besieged for months, soldiers fighting until their ammunition ran out, then fighting with knives, pilots deliberately crashing their damaged aircraft into enemy targets, civilians mounting resistance movements against occupying forces generation after generation. Jalrex opened a secondary file labeled Cultural Context. This contained human entertainment. He expected art and music. Instead, he found thousands of stories about survival, about fighting impossible odds, about humans refusing to die even when death was certain. Their fiction glorified resistance. Movies about small groups defeating overwhelming forces, books about humans surviving apocalypses, video games where a single soldier fought armies. Their culture was saturated with the idea that surrender was unacceptable, that fighting was better than submission, that death was preferable to defeat. He found their horror entertainment particularly disturbing. Humans created elaborate fictional scenarios designed to frighten themselves. Monsters, aliens, apocalypses. And in these stories, humans always fought back, always survived, always found a way. They had made fear into entertainment. They had made survival into art. And they had been doing it for thousands of years. Jalrex pulled up the biological data. The humans included their own medical research, pain thresholds, adrenaline responses, the fight-or-flight reflex that dumped chemicals into their bloodstream during danger. But where most species chose flight, humans seemed to choose fight with disturbing frequency. They included data about their planet. Earth was classified as what exobiologists called a death world: high gravity, extreme weather patterns, dangerous predators, toxic plants. Humans had evolved in an environment that constantly tried to kill them. And they had thrived anyway. They lived in deserts where water was scarce. They lived in Arctic regions where temperatures dropped far below freezing. They lived on mountains where oxygen was thin. They were adaptable, resilient, stubborn beyond reason. The final section of the data package contained a simple compilation, a list of every resistance movement in human history, every time humans had been conquered and then fought back. The list was long, terrifyingly long, and almost every entry ended the same way. Eventually regained independence. At the bottom of the transmission, the humans had included their closing message. We are humanity. We don't know how to surrender. Come if you dare, Shalrek sat in silence. Around him his flagship hummed with power. 400 warships waited for his orders. The invasion was 12 hours away. Earth hung before them, small and blue and seemingly helpless. But was it helpless? He called his senior staff to an emergency meeting. Within minutes his officers assembled in the war room. Shalrex displayed the human transmission on the main screens. Read this, he ordered. All of it. I want threat assessments in 4 hours. His officers looked confused but obeyed. Shalrex watched their expressions change as they read. Confusion became concern. Concern became alarm. By the time they finished, the war room was silent. Sub-Commander Thera spoke first. They're showing us their own violence. Why would they do this? Intimidation, suggested the tactical officer. They want us to believe they're more dangerous than our initial assessment suggested. Are they lying? Shalrex asked. Run verification protocols. Cross-reference their historical claims with observable data. The verification took 2 hours. When it finished, the results were clear. The humans had not exaggerated. If anything, they had understated. Their own historical records were filled with violence, warfare, and survival against impossible odds. Shalrex studied the data. His empire had conquered 846 civilizations. Some had surrendered immediately. Some had fought briefly before accepting defeat. None had presented a profile like humanity. Analysis, he ordered. What would occupation of Earth actually require? His strategic planning officer pulled up projections. Based on their historical resistance patterns, we should expect immediate insurgency. Conventional occupation would require at least 3 times our normal garrison forces. Pacification would take decades, possibly centuries. Casualties would be significant. How significant? Conservative estimate 30% losses over the first 10 years of occupation. And that assumes we commit sufficient forces to maintain control of population centers. 30%. Shalrex had never lost 30% of an occupation force. Most conquests resulted in less than 1% casualties, usually during the initial subjugation. What about their nuclear weapons? He asked. The weapons specialist looked uncomfortable. Their nuclear arsenal is primitive but extensive. If they choose to use them during invasion, they could inflict substantial damage. Not enough to stop us, but enough to make the conquest extremely costly. Would they use them knowing it would destroy their own planet? The xenopsychology officer answered. Based on their historical patterns, possibly yes. They have multiple documented cases of choosing mutual destruction over surrender. The Vorthian fleet held position at Jupiter's orbit. For 6 hours, 400 warships simply waited. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They hung in the darkness like frozen knives. On Earth, humanity watched and wondered. The alien fleet had stopped. No one knew why. Telescopes tracked every ship. Military commands waited for orders that never came. People who had spent days preparing to die suddenly found themselves in limbo, caught between hope and despair. General Marcus Rivera stood in the command center beneath Geneva, staring at the display showing the alien fleet. Dr. Sarah Chen sat beside him, monitoring the communication channels for any new transmissions. Why did they stop? Someone asked. They're reading our message, Sarah said. They have to be. That's the only explanation. And then what? They laugh and vaporize us anyway. Rivera said nothing. He had made his play. The truth about humanity was racing through alien computers somewhere near Jupiter. Either it would matter or it would not. Either the Vorthians would see humans as too expensive to conquer, or they would see them as a threat that needed to be eliminated immediately. Both options were better than surrender. Aboard the Vorthian flagship, Shalrex had called his most trusted advisors to a private meeting. His senior staff assembled in a secure room, isolated from the rest of the crew. What they discussed here would determine the fate of billions. I want opinions, Shalrex said. Completely honest assessments. No protocol, no doctrine, just truth. Should we proceed with this invasion? The tactical officer spoke first. From a purely military perspective, we would win. Our technology is superior. We would destroy their military within days. Orbital bombardment would shatter their resistance. And then we would face 8 billion insurgents on a planet filled with weapons we cannot confiscate. Nuclear material, chemical weapons, biological agents, even their conventional firearms number in the hundreds of millions. We would win battles and lose the peace. The strategic planning officer added, I've reviewed 40 cases from their history. Occupations, invasions, imperial conquests. In almost every case where the occupying force had superior technology and the occupied population had sufficient numbers and will to resist, the occupation eventually failed. Sometimes after decades, but it failed. The British Empire occupied India, the planning officer continued. 300 million humans controlled by a few thousand British soldiers. Superior weapons, superior organization. It lasted 200 years. Then India regained independence. The occupation cost more than it gained. Jalrex listened. His officers were describing something unprecedented. A target that was simultaneously weak and dangerous, primitive and terrifying. The xenopsychology officer spoke next, and her words made everyone uncomfortable. Commander, I've studied their transmission extensively. I need to present something disturbing. She pulled up a compilation of human data on the main display. This species evolved on a death world. High gravity, extreme temperatures, dangerous predators. Their evolution selected for endurance, adaptability, and aggression. But something else happened. Something unusual. The display showed human brain scans, chemical analyses, psychological profiles. Humans have developed something called persistence. They can pursue a goal for years, decades, generations. They do not give up when rational calculation suggests they should. They have a concept called spite. They will harm themselves if it means harming their enemy. They value revenge almost as much as survival. She highlighted several historical examples. A human general named Sherman once said, "War is hell." He meant it literally. He believed in total war, in making conquest so painful that the enemy would never fight again. Many human military theorists agree. If they believe they will lose, they will ensure the victory costs everything. Are you suggesting they would destroy themselves rather than surrender? Thera asked. I'm suggesting they might destroy us along with themselves. Their nuclear weapons could not defeat our fleet, but they could make Earth uninhabitable. They could turn their planet into a radioactive wasteland and dare us to try and hold it. And based on their history, they might actually do it. Silence filled the room. Jalrex had conquered 60 worlds. He had never encountered a species that would consider mutual annihilation preferable to defeat. There's more, the xenopsychology officer said. I reviewed their entertainment media. Their fiction. It provides insight into their cultural values. They have thousands of stories about humans defeating superior alien invaders. It's a common theme. They imagine themselves as underdogs who win through determination and cleverness. This is their mythology, their cultural identity. She pulled up examples. Movies where humans defeat advanced aliens. Books where human resistance movements overthrow interstellar empires. Video games where lone soldiers fight alien armies. They've been mentally preparing for this scenario for generations, she said. Not consciously, but culturally. Every human child grows up with stories about fighting impossible odds and winning. It's embedded in their psychology. They expect to resist. They expect to fight. And they expect eventually to win. The weapons specialist raised a tentative hand. There's another concern. Their transmission included technical specifications for all their weapons, including their nuclear arsenals. I've analyzed the data. They have approximately 13,000 nuclear warheads. Primitive, but functional. We knew this, Jalrex said. Yes, but I've been calculating distribution patterns. If they chose to detonate those weapons strategically during our invasion, they could inflict catastrophic casualties on landing forces. Not enough to defeat us, but enough to make the initial conquest extremely expensive, and that's before we factor in conventional resistance. Jalrex looked at the calculations. The numbers were worse than he expected. Conquering Earth would not be impossible. But it would be costly, possibly very costly, and the occupation would be even worse. High Command needs to see this, Thera said. This is beyond our authority to decide. Jalrex nodded. He opened a secure channel to Vorthian High Command light years away. The message would take time to arrive and more time for a response. But this decision was too important to make alone. He composed his report carefully. He included all the data from the human transmission, all the analysis from his staff, all the projections showing what conquering Earth would actually require. At the end, he added his personal assessment. Target Earth represents an unprecedented threat profile. Species demonstrates extreme resilience, cultural predisposition to resistance, and willingness to accept mutual destruction rather than surrender. Recommend classification upgrade and strategic reassessment. He sent the message and waited. High Command would receive it in 6 hours. They would debate. They would analyze. And then they would send orders. Meanwhile, Jalrex ordered the fleet to hold position. No advance, no retreat. Just waiting. His crew was confused. The target world hung before them, helpless and vulnerable. Standard protocol was to proceed with invasion. But Jalrex had learned something in 300 cycles of conquest. Sometimes the most important question was not, can we win, but should we fight? Earth had shown him their truth. Now he had to decide what that truth meant. Days passed. The fleet remained at Jupiter's orbit. On Earth, the tension was unbearable. No attack came. No surrender demand. Just silence and waiting. General Rivera knew something had changed. The aliens had stopped. They were thinking. That meant the message had worked. Or it had failed spectacularly, and they were preparing to make an example of Earth. We should prepare for bombardment, one of his officers suggested. If they're going to attack, we should be ready. Ready how? Rivera asked quietly. We can't stop them. We can only make them regret coming. Sarah Chen looked at him. Do you think it worked? The message, Rivera considered. I think we showed them something they didn't expect. Whether that saves us or dooms us, I don't know. High above Earth, Jalrex received his response from High Command. He read it once. Then again. Then he called his senior staff. High Command has reviewed our assessment, he announced. They agree. Earth represents an unacceptable cost-to-benefit ratio for conquest. Relief flooded through his officers. Thera actually slumped in her chair. However, Jalrex continued, High Command has ordered a new classification for this species. They are upgrading Earth from Category 5. Minimal resistance expected to Category 1 extinction risk. Everyone stared at him. Category 1 was reserved for species that posed a genuine threat to the Vorthian Empire. It was the highest threat rating possible. In 2,000 years of expansion, only 3 species had ever been classified Category 1. All 3 had been eliminated. Extinction risk? The tactical officer asked. But they can't even leave their own solar system. Not yet, Jalrex said. High Command's analysis suggests that if we leave them alone, humans will develop faster than light travel within a century. Possibly sooner if they reverse engineer our technology, and when they do, they will expand. Aggressively. Their history suggests they will not be peaceful neighbors. He displayed High Command's projections. If humanity developed interstellar travel, they would become extremely dangerous. A species with their psychology, their resilience, and their technology would be a significant threat. The message arrived 3 days after the Vorthian fleet stopped advancing. Dr. Sarah Chen was the first to receive it. She had been monitoring the communication channels constantly, surviving on coffee and nervous energy. When the alien transmission began, she almost did not believe it was real. She read it twice. Then she called General Rivera. They're leaving, she said. Her voice shook. They're actually leaving. Rivera arrived within minutes. He read the message on Sarah's screen. It was formal, written in precise language that their translation software handled easily. Classification updated. Target Earth redesignated Category 1. Extinction risk. Recommended action. Quarantine and monitoring. Vorthian occupation forces withdrawing to establish perimeter. Automated warning systems deploying. Sol system hereby designated quarantine zone by authority of Vorthian High Command. Below the official text was something unexpected. A secondary message, less formal, almost personal. To the humans of Earth, you showed us who you are. We believe you. Your system is now forbidden to all Vorthian forces. You have earned isolation. Use it wisely. It was signed by Fleet Commander Jalrex. Rivera stared at the message. Around him, the command center erupted in chaos. People shouted. Some cried. Others laughed with relief so intense it sounded like hysteria. They had survived. Against impossible odds, humanity had survived. But Rivera saw something else in the message. something that made him uneasy even as he felt relief. Extinction risk, he said quietly. They didn't back down because they pitied us. They backed down because they're afraid of what we might become. Sarah nodded. The quarantine. They're putting us in a box, giving us time to think about what happens next, or giving themselves time to prepare if we break out. Above Earth, the Vorthian fleet began moving. 400 warships broke from their holding position near Jupiter, but they did not leave the solar system. Instead, they spread out. Some took position near the asteroid belt. Others moved to the outer planets. They were establishing a perimeter, a cage. Within hours, automated beacons activated throughout the Sol system. Each one broadcast the same message on all known frequencies. Warning: dangerous death world species. Vorthian quarantine zone. Unauthorized entry forbidden. On Earth, people gathered in streets, in homes, in public squares. They watched the news broadcast showing the alien fleet withdrawing. They listened to government officials explaining what quarantine meant. They tried to understand what they had won and what they had lost. President Chen addressed the world from the UN building. She looked exhausted. The last week had aged her 10 years. My fellow citizens of Earth, she began. The alien fleet has withdrawn. We are not under invasion. We are not facing extinction. But we are not free either. The aliens have placed our entire solar system under quarantine. We cannot leave. No one can enter. We are alone. She paused. But we are alive. And we are together. And we have time? Time to prepare. Time to advance. Time to decide what kind of species we want to be when we finally break through that quarantine. General Rivera watched the address from Geneva. The president had asked him to speak, but he had declined. This was not a military victory. It was something stranger, something unprecedented. Humanity had won by being too dangerous to touch, too expensive to conquer, too stubborn to subjugate. They had won by telling the truth. Sarah Chen found him after the address. What happens now? She asked. Rivera looked at the data displays showing the alien beacons surrounding Earth's solar system. Now we prove them wrong, or right. I'm not sure which would be better. What do you mean? They called us an extinction risk. They believe if we develop faster than light travel, we'll be dangerous to the galaxy. Maybe they're right. Look at our history. We've barely stopped fighting each other. What happens when we have access to other worlds? Do we become conquerors? Do we become the thing we just escaped? Sarah considered this. Or maybe we become something better. We survived because we showed our darkness. Maybe survival will teach us to find our light. Rivera hoped she was right. But hope was not a strategy. Over the following months, humanity adjusted to its new reality. The quarantine was absolute. Nothing could enter or leave the Sol system. But within that cage, humanity was free, and they used that freedom. The message humanity sent to the Vorthians had included technical data, communications protocols, transmission frequencies, information about how alien technology worked. Scientists began analyzing that data. Engineers began testing theories. Within a year, humanity had made more progress in advanced physics than they had in the previous century. The quarantine had given them something else too: unity. Faced with an external threat, the old divisions seemed petty. Nations that had been enemies for generations began cooperating. Resources were shared. Scientists collaborated across borders. The military forces of Earth unified under a single command structure. General Rivera, now promoted to Supreme Commander of United Earth Defense, oversaw the transformation. Humanity was preparing, not for war necessarily, but for survival, for the day when they would break the quarantine and face the galaxy beyond. We have maybe 50 years, he told his staff. Maybe less. Either we develop the technology to break through the Vorthian perimeter, or they decide we're too dangerous to leave alive and come back to finish the job. We need to be ready for both possibilities. Earth scientists worked on faster-than-light travel. Engineers designed weapons that could threaten alien warships. Biologists studied human genetics, looking for ways to enhance natural abilities. Psychologists developed training programs to prepare humanity for contact with other species. And historians compiled everything humanity had learned. Every mistake, every war, every moment of darkness that had led to their salvation. They wanted future generations to understand. Humanity had survived not because they were peaceful, but because they were honest about their capacity for violence. 10 years after first contact, Earth launched its first faster-than-light probe. It was small, barely larger than a car. It used a crude warp drive based on reverse-engineered Vorthian communications technology. The probe crossed the light-speed barrier for exactly 3 seconds before exploding. But those 3 seconds proved it was possible. 20 years after first contact, Earth built its first interstellar ship. The U.S. Defiance was designed to be fast, tough, and armed. It carried a crew of 200 and enough weapons to make any alien think twice before attacking. It was not an exploration vessel. It was a statement. General Rivera, now in his 70s, stood at the launch ceremony. He had spent 2 decades preparing humanity for this moment, for the day they would face the galaxy not as victims but as equals. When we break the quarantine, he said to the assembled crowd, the galaxy will be watching. They will expect us to be violent, aggressive, dangerous, and maybe we are. But we can also be more. We can be the species that learned from our mistakes, that chose cooperation over conquest, that used our strength to protect rather than oppress. He paused. But make no mistake, if the galaxy comes for us again, we will be ready. We will never surrender. We will never submit. We showed them our truth once. We can show them again. The Defiance launched 3 months later. It approached the quarantine perimeter slowly, broadcasting peaceful intentions on all frequencies. The Vorthian warning beacons activated, transmitting their danger warnings with increased urgency. The Defiance crossed the perimeter. Alarms sounded across the Vorthian fleet. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Would they fire? Would they attack? The Vorthian ships held position. They tracked the Defiance but did not engage. The human ship passed through the perimeter and continued into interstellar space. Humanity was free. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Jennifer Rodriguez stared at the stars beyond Sol. They looked different now. Not just distant suns, but potential destinations, possible homes, or possible threats. She thought about the message that had saved Earth 20 years ago. The truth about human violence and human persistence. The galaxy knew what humanity was capable of. Now they would see what humanity chose to be. Helm, she ordered, set course for Alpha Centauri. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you give humans time to prepare. Light years away, Fleet Commander Jalrex received the report. The humans had broken quarantine. Their ship was primitive but functional. They were entering the galaxy. He was not surprised. He had known this day would come. The only question had been how long it would take. Jalrex composed a message to High Command. Humans have achieved interstellar capability. Quarantine broken. Recommend galaxy-wide advisory. The response came quickly. Confirmed. Issue general warning to all civilizations. Include full documentation of Earth's history and capabilities. Let the galaxy decide how to respond. Within days, every major civilization in the galaxy received the same package of information. The complete truth about humanity. Their wars. Their weapons. Their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And a simple warning. These are the humans. They come from a death world. They do not surrender. Approach with appropriate caution. The galaxy reacted with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and respect. Some civilizations closed their borders, wanting nothing to do with a species the Vorthian Empire considered dangerous.